Environment and Transportation Committee. This is our annual State of Agriculture briefing. We're going to hear this afternoon from Mary Lou Brown from the Delmarva Chicken Association, Kurt Fuchs from the Horizon Farm Credit, Greg Dell, Maryland Farm Bureau, Jenny Schmidt, Maryland Grain Producers Association, John Swain, Maryland Association of Soil Conservation Districts. I should note this committee has the General Assembly, or the House of Delegates anyway, two farmers, Delegate Otto and Delegate Ziegler. So we have both jurisdictional and personal interest in this topic. So I'll ask the panelists to come on up so we can be ready to go. And yep, we can sit in any order that you like. And I think, colleagues, we'll just wait till after the panel presents and then we can do questions. We are joined in the audience by some of our friends from the Department of Agriculture, including our former colleague, Rachel Jones. Rachel, if you and your team want to give a quick wave. I know you're here as a great resource if we have questions for the department. Of course, we have lots of interaction with you, but excited to hear from our other stakeholders today. And we can go ahead and start with the Delmarva Chicken Association and just work on through. So thank you all for being with us.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Mary Lou Brown, and I own Maple Breeze Farm in northern Dorchester County. My daughter, my son, and myself raise approximately 140,000 birds in 6 chicken barns 4.5 times a year, which would feed a sellout crowd at Camden Yards for 1 year. I am currently Vice President of DCA, served on State Farm Bureau Board for 6 years, still on Dorchester County Farm Bureau Board, and an active 4-H leader. In 2014, we installed solar on our farm to cover our farm needs. We would like to expand that production, but are unable to do since there's a lot of roadblocks blocking us, and we don't know what that is. And there are other growers in our same situation. The chicken community on the Eastern Shore is made up of more than 1,300 independent family farms. They raise chickens in 4,800 chicken houses across Delaware, the Eastern Shore of Maryland, and Virginia. 5 chicken companies are on the shore, and I am very thankful for that. They employ 18,000 people, and there are hundreds of allied businesses that are tied to the industry. In 2022, we raised 596 million birds, which equated to 4.4 billion pounds of chicken. In Maryland, there are more than 600 growers and a total of 2.3 billion economic impact on just the Eastern Shore. The chicken companies alone contribute more than $123 million in local and state taxes. One of the greatest risks that is still a concern to the chicken community is high-path avian influenza. This is a highly contagious disease that can spread very quickly and is fatal. Since late 2022, high-path has circulated throughout the United States, with the most recent cases in our areas in Caroline County, Maryland. In November 2023, just 6.2 miles from my farm lane. Fortunately, we have only had 1 outbreak on the Eastern Shore of Maryland in the past 12 months. Within just the last 30 days across the United States, there have been 26 commercial flocks infected and 5.95 million birds that were affected. Practicing biosecurity, similar to what you experienced when you visited a poultry farm this fall, is our key to mitigating avian influenza. When there is a detection, the working partnership between the State Department of Agriculture, USDA, and the chicken industry is vital to eradicating the disease. Finally, one of the many things that are important to growers and the chicken community is being a good neighbor. While the number of growers has decreased 42% over the past 20 years, the population has increased 30% on the shore. The Delmarva Chicken Association developed a good neighbor policy over 15 years ago. There are best management practices that we encourage producers to use. and they include vegetative environmental buffers on our farms. These buffers include trees, which my farm put in over 20 years ago around the entire farm, grasses outside the fans, and pollinators or other plantings between the chicken houses. In an internal survey the DCA conducted in 2021, 62% of the farmers were surrounded by natural vegetation. 25% have planted buffers. DCA has received grants funding to develop a cost-sharing program for additional plantings on farms, especially in front of fans and in between houses. Poultry growers see the need to be good neighbors and stewards of our land. Finally, you should have received an invite for the Chicken Day in Annapolis, Friday, February 16th at the Historic Inn in Annapolis. Visit with other growers, eat lots of chicken, and take a virtual reality tour of a chicken house. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. And as you noted, we had a great visit to the Eastern Shore a few months ago. And actually, I think each of your organizations helped facilitate visits that day. So we'll take the virtual tour, but we all had a great in-person tour as well. So thank you for that. And we can now turn to Kurt Fuchs with Horizon Farm Credit.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Kurt Fuchs with Horizon Farm Credit. I serve as our Senior Vice President of External Affairs. I'm here today to kind of give a pretty general overview of what we're seeing, what we saw in 2023. But first, I thought it would be helpful to give a little bit of background on who Farm Credit is. So Farm Credit is a part of a nationwide network of financial cooperatives that began in 1916 to support rural communities and agriculture with reliable, consistent credit and financial services in good times and bad. We serve a 5-state footprint that includes all of Pennsylvania and Delaware, Central Maryland, the 5 northern counties of the Shenandoah Valley of Virginia, and the 2 panhandles of West Virginia, with over $6.5 billion in loans outstanding to over 23,000 members across that 100 county footprint. We're one of the largest ag lenders on the East Coast. To be clear, we serve all of agriculture. So from conventional, organic, biodynamic, things you haven't even thought of yet, we support all types of agriculture, and we're happy to do so. Our major commodities in Maryland include cash grains, poultry, which in Maryland, it means broiler chickens, dairy, and nursery landscape, sometimes referred to as the green industry. So I want to just touch on a few of those, what we saw in 2023. For poultry, on Maryland's Eastern Shore and throughout Delmarva, chicken growers saw some return to normalcy after a softened market and the disruptions caused by COVID. Unfortunately, we also saw the impact of inflation, high interest rates that further squeeze the margins for our poultry growers. On a positive note, we've seen some of the construction and repair costs go down, but it still is a challenge for new growers to put up chicken houses and remain a viable operation because of those increased costs. For grain, 2023 was a strong grain year from a yield perspective in much of the state. That being said, inputs remain high and prices have fallen off, unfortunately. As our regional vice president that leads our Delmarva region put it, our grain customers yielded their way to profitability in 2023. And there remains a lot of concern with farmers going into 2024. Outlook for commodity prices appear to be weak, and input costs have yet to follow suit. And as a result, many of our farmers are being quite conservative with their spending, and rightly so. In particular, as we approach the season where farmers look to extend their lines of credit for planting, and with interest rates where they are, that is, they take a lot into consideration, and as I said, are being relatively conservative with their needs. Our dairy customers in Maryland generally had an average year in 2023. And by that, I mean that most didn't lose ground but they likely didn't gain a lot of ground from a balance sheet perspective as well. But regardless of whether a significant portion of the industry is doing well, we can't forget that these are family-owned small businesses, each with their own unique business model and operating structure that have their own real and varied challenges. And that's why we continue to offer our member assistance program to our customers. It provides 24/7 access, both online and via telephone, to master's level clinicians, offering support both to the customer themselves and their family members. They can seek out financial and legal advice. They can seek any number of types of counseling free of charge and 100% anonymous. And there's even some identity theft recovery provisions within that program as well, just to name a few aspects. Additionally, the Farm Credit Council, which is the farm credit institutions across the country, it's our national trade association, partnered with the American Farm Bureau Federation, the National Farmers Union, and Michigan State University's University Extension's Farm Stress program to develop a mental health awareness training program, recognizing that when we have tough times in agriculture, we want to be able to be a place of support, whether it's organizations like the grain producers, Farm Credit, DCA, folks that are engaged with producers. This program offers free of charge training so we can start to identify signs of mental stress and look at ways of effective communication to help find those folks some help. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention a critical tool that we utilize in partnership with our customers, and that's Marbidco. Many of you all are familiar with the Maryland Agriculture and Resource-Based Industry Development Corporation, again, commonly referred to as Marbidco, but they offer loans and small grants to ag and resource-based businesses, and in particular, provide a good service to young and beginning producers, which is core to our mission as well. In 2023, we partnered with Marbidco on 14 loan projects, representing $5.8 million from Marbidco, leveraging $15 million from Farm Credit. That's almost a 3-to-1 leverage ratio. In addition to that, we are strong users of the next generation farmland acquisition program at Marbidco. To date, they have had 46 projects go through both the original program, which is parcels above 50 acres, and then the small scale program, which is 10 to 49 acres. Of those 46, Farm Credit has partnered with Marbidco on just over half of those. But despite the high interest rates, stubborn input costs, and softening commodity markets, we remain bullish on the prospects for Maryland agriculture. We have access to a significant consumer base nearby in Baltimore, Wilmington, DC, Philadelphia. Our farmers are second to none in resource management and conservation innovation. There's excitement and drive in the next generation, and we have a dynamic mix of livestock, crops, and marketing approaches right here within the state. Farm Credit's excited about the future of ag in Maryland, and we're committed to being there for members as well as the next generation, helping them achieve the best possible outcomes for their farms and their families. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. We appreciate it. We can now turn to Greg Dell with the Maryland Farm Bureau.
Thank you for the opportunity, Mr. Chairman and the committee. I'd like to introduce myself. As the chairman said, my name is Greg Dell. My family farms in Westminster and Carroll County, Maryland. We raise corn, soybeans, and sorghum, and we also buy and sell grain from local producers at our elevator, which we in turn supply a lot of the chicken industry in the state, which brings me to the point that Ms. Brown touched on a lot of things that the Farm Bureau, who I'm here to represent, has in their arsenal for looking at here in the future. As Ms. Brown also said, we have solar on our farm. We installed it 2 years ago on a building, and the Farm Bureau most definitely understands the need to meet the goals for renewable energy. As I understand, it's 50% renewable by 2031, but we definitely do not want to see farmland take the brunt of that. There are many other avenues for solar to be applied to. Just as I talked about, we put it on an existing building where the structure was able to handle that extra weight on the roof. There's also brownfields. Let's see here. Brownfields, rooftops, parking lots, and urban areas that could 100% be used to assist in the clean energy mandate. We strongly oppose placing these commercial facilities on class 1 and 2 agricultural soils and reject labeling them as agricultural activities. Mainly because of the loss of acreage, we obviously grow a lot of crops to provide for a lot of chickens. Just as Ms. Brown said, one farm can produce enough chickens to supply Camden Yards for a year. So we have our due diligence to keep these animals fed. And when looking at putting these projects on prime and productive farmland, as of now, there is no certainty as to the whether the land can be returned to agriculture after the expiration of the solar project. Farm Bureau also supports urban agriculture in Maryland. We hope to see it grow and help with the issue of food deserts in parts of the state. Last year, House Bill 152, the Urban Agricultural Grant Programs, was passed, giving urban agriculture a much-needed funding opportunity. The members of Maryland Farm Bureau support the expansion of urban farming and agriculture and creation of a clear pathway for land ownership for urban farmers. They have been, urban farmers have been a huge part of Maryland Farm Bureau and a growing part of Maryland Farm Bureau and Maryland agriculture in general. They've made a lot of strides in how they operate and the projects that they're doing within their communities. It definitely invites you all to go any chance you get to visit an urban farm. They're quite the feat to see. Next on the list, we have agricultural property assessments. We've seen some problems with ag properties being reassessed. It was brought to our attention when actually a board member for Maryland Farm Bureau had a 100% increase in his assessment for a pole barn used to store hay, which in turn obviously changed his tax equation quite a bit. In looking into this, the Farm Bureau discovered that over 1,100 properties in Maryland saw assessments raised by at least 25%, with some of facing increases of up to 600%. Maryland's farmers operate in a landscape of tight profit margins. We just talked about market prices going down, and input prices are still riding the COVID highs. Some farmers have turned to value-added agriculture, and that has changed the landscape of their farms slightly, and in SDAT's eyes has changed their tax assessment. We to navigate these tax assessment or navigate through this, we cannot, or the challenges that we have, we cannot really take on the changes in tax assessments on these farms that especially of up to 600%. That is a huge change in a person's profit margin when you look at future risks and things like that. And obviously makes it hard to keep a family farm operational when you're looking to move forward and make value-added changes in your operation. I don't really think there's much more to touch on for me. As we've said, their margins are tight. They're always tight. For us, it seems like we operate very stingy with our commodities because it's all buy retail or buy wholesale, sell retail, or vice versa, I'm sorry. And, and, but we look forward to working with you all and hope, for a bright 2024. And I really appreciate the opportunity to chat with you and bring forward our problems.
Thank you, Mr. Dell. You mentioned urban farms. This committee did visit in Baltimore Farmer Chippy's property, and so we got a great look at that aspect of things as well. So thanks for flagging that. And let's now turn to Jenny Schmidt with the Maryland Grain Producers Association.
Good afternoon, Chairman Corman, Vice Chairman Boyce, and members of the committee. My name is Jenny Schmidt. I am a full-time farmer in Queen Anne's County. We grow corn, wheat, soybeans, lima beans, green beans, and wine grapes. I am both a registered dietitian with a bachelor's degree and a master's degree in nutrition, focused on food and agricultural biotechnology, and am a certified pesticide applicator, doing the majority of spraying on our farm, and seek to educate consumers and fellow dietitians about the intersection of food and farming through my online forum, The Foodie Farmer. I'm a board member of the Maryland Grain Producers, as well as Maryland's delegate to the U.S. Grains Council, which is our export promotion board. Grain grown in Maryland includes corn, wheat, barley, sorghum, oats, triticale, and as well as the oilseed soybeans. Maryland farmers grow over 1 million acres of grain and soybeans annually at a value of over $1 billion and supporting nearly 9,000 jobs in the state of Maryland. Maryland farmers are arguably the most conservation-minded in the country, implementing a variety of best management practices to not only improve productivity, but also reduce nutrients and sediment from entering our watershed. These practices include enhanced nutrient management, no-till, conservation till, planting cover crops, buffers, or grassy waterways. Many of these conservation practices would not be possible on a large scale without the use of herbicides. To grow a healthy, resilient crop, farmers must control weeds that compete with crops for nutrients and moisture. Traditionally, tillage or working the ground, such as plowing, has been used for weed control, but the cautious use of herbicides allows farmers to control the weeds without disturbing the soil. Not working the ground, or no-till, or conservation farming reduces erosion and nutrient loss and is part of how Maryland agriculture has made great strides in improving water quality. Practicing no-till also means fewer hours in the tractor burning diesel and therefore reduces emissions. 1 acre of no-till corn can sequester up to 36,000 pounds of carbon per acre per year. Herbicides and pesticides are important tools for Maryland grain farmers to use when necessary. These products undergo rigorous evaluation by the U.S. EPA, including the risk of harm to humans, wildlife, fish, plants, endangered species, non-target organisms, contamination of surface or groundwater from leaching, runoff, and spray drift. They are reevaluated at least every 15 years to account for new science. Maryland grain farmers support the federal regulatory framework where the expertise and resources exist to regulate pesticides based on science. Adherence to good science is critical in regulations as new invasive species such as the spotted lanternfly, which I dealt with extensively in my vineyard this year, arise. An effective control was chlorpyrifos, which the state of Maryland has phased out. The alternatives cited by the proponents of banning chlorpyrifos were neonicotinoids. Now, those are under scrutiny at the state legislative level. Restricting options to control pests with state legislative bans of products EPA has deemed safe for use according to directed labels makes me concerned Maryland agriculture will suffer under anti-science policy development. Maryland grain farmers value research and continued improvement, so much so that 0.5% of every bushel of grain sold is remitted to our checkoff program, which is used to make grants for education, research, and market development. Farmer dollars have been used to fund research on the efficacy of pesticide seed treatments, nutrient management, cover crops, and controlling diseases in small grains. Over the last 12 seasons, we have invested over $1 million in the very popular MPT show, Maryland Farm and Harvest. Although Maryland grain farmers seek to be as productive and efficient as possible, we are often beholden to factors outside our control which limit our productivity. One of the biggest contributors to yield loss is the burgeoning deer population. Deer cause tens of millions of dollars of crop damage each year. Farmers do have options such as crop damage permits to control for deer, but processing the meat in the off-season becomes a constraint. Maryland grain producers urge legislators to invest in deer processing and donation programs such as the Maryland Farmers and Hunters Feed the Hungry program, which funds deer processing, and all the venison is donated to the food bank or local food pantries. A win-win for farmers and Marylanders in need of high-quality protein. We urge you to investigate options for controlling Sika deer, a non-native invasive species wreaking havoc on the lower eastern shore. Despite the pressures of development, solar, weather, and wildlife, Maryland has some of the best grain farmers in the country. Even with regulatory nutrient management, Maryland farmers have placed first in the National Corn Yield Contest with over 300 bushels per acre. Since 1996, American farmers have increased corn yields by 42%, while reducing nutrient use by 15%. Farmers are resilient and innovative, but there is no one-size-fits-all solution. We must have tools and options available to continue to make the best decisions for the sustainability of our family farms and the next generation to come. Thanks for your time.
Thank you very much. We'll finally turn to John Swain from the Maryland Association of Soil Conservation Districts.
I'm good. Thank you for having me. My name is John Swain. I'm a farmer in Talbot County. I am currently chairman of our local Soil Conservation District Board of Supervisors and recently became president of the Maryland Association of Soil Conservation Districts. Maryland's 24 conservation districts were established to support voluntary, locally led conservation for farmers and communities in every county across the state. The program's staffing and priorities look a little different in each district, depending on land use and whether the district is more urban or rural, and the roles and responsibilities of the partners in the county. As far as WIP progress, the districts are best known for working with farmers to implement practices that meet our Chesapeake Bay WIP goals. Investments in technical staff in recent years are paying off. The new staff is working to write soil conservation and water quality conservation plans and address the challenge of expiring or retiring plants. We've made steady progress in livestock waste storage structures, forest buffers, wetland practices, and ag stormwater management. Some practices that need additional work include ag drainage management, buffers, especially grass buffers, and exclusion fencing. The Maryland Department of Agriculture has introduced programs to explore new incentives for implementation, including Maryland's Healthy Soils Program and Healthy Soils Competitive Fund, Cover Crop Plus, and Conservation Buffer Initiative. They've also revised cost share rates on many practices to encourage greater implementation. Maryland's conservation districts also work with farmers to use federal funds for conservation. The state's investment in technical staff at the districts has been critical for leveraging the Inflation Reduction Act funds through Farm Bill programs. In 2023, conservation districts helped get a total of $64.2 million in the state and federal funds on the ground to implement conservation practices. Many people are familiar with the district for their role in working with farmers to right. However, districts often provide services to urban stakeholders as well. One example is the review and approval of plans for small ponds that increase safety and water quality benefits for projects under development. Conservation districts have been working to offer these services since USDA's Natural Resource Conservation Service stopped providing small pond reviews for non-ag projects in 2022. This takes the burden off of MDE for the projects that would otherwise be routed through their dam safety permit process, and improves efficiency that supports economic development. Senate Bill 196 has been introduced to address a gap, enabling the districts to develop a fee schedule similar to the erosion and sediment plan reviews and that allows them to support this function. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Colleagues, if you have questions, please light up those microphones, but we really appreciate everybody's participation today. You're obviously really important economically and environmentally to the state of Maryland. And with that, let me turn it over to Delegate Foley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to everyone who presented these very informative reports. I personally think that our agriculture industry here in Maryland is incredibly important to the diversity and the vibrancy of our state. So thank you for being here today. My question is for Greg Dell. You mentioned as one of the problems the assessment issue. And I believe you cited that one property was assessed more than 600% more than what it was. Were there any changes in the use of that property that prompted that assessment?
No, so what what we understand is the problem is that they are not boots on the ground anymore. They're taking aerial photography or, you know, the Google Maps and assessing buildings. And I believe in the case of our board member, it was a new building, a new pole building for storing hay for his horses. And that was the case, that it was 100%. He had built it, and then when they had came back and reassessed, I guess in his third year, it went up 100% with no change in use.
Wow, 100%, not
That
600.
well, that was just the board member
Oh,
that
okay.
I know specifically. The 600%, it was 25% to 600% was the range and change after the Maryland Farm Bureau dug into it.
Mr. Chairman, if I could follow up. So when we did the aforementioned in-person visits over the interim, we did hear from, I believe it was either the owners of a winery on agriculture land or a brewery, I can't remember which one, that there was a problem with assessments regarding the use of the property for winery, even though it was growing Maryland crops and using Maryland crops. But that's a different issue than the issue you raised. Is that correct?
It actually kind of falls under the same umbrella. They're seeing the same similar issues. I don't know specifics of that, but it does. I know it falls under the same umbrella as breweries and wineries. We're seeing the same issue. Folks that have had breweries on farms are seeing these raises in assessments that are extremely large and abrupt.
That's a very difficult problem. Thank you.
Yep.
Delegate Healy.
Thank you very much also to the panel and everyone representing Maryland agriculture. My question is also for Mr. Dell. I wanted to ask you a little bit more about how the Farm Bureau arrives at your position on various things, such as you talked about not wanting to have solar panels installed on farms, although some farmers do want that. So how do you decide what the Farm Bureau is going to be taking a position on?
Yes, thank you for your question. Our Farm Bureau meets obviously on county level. We're a grassroots organization. We meet throughout the year, and then at our convention in December, we have a list of policies, and the state comes together in our convention and votes on those policies. And I touched on, you know, farmers as Farm Bureau not wanting to support solar on an ag land. We are all for private property rights. If that's, you know, if that's what the landowner would like to do, we certainly, you know, agree with that. But I think the biggest push, and actually we see it in Carroll County, our commissioners voted against or voted down putting solar on ag remainders. And now we have the state looking to tell our county, which our county commissioners have made the decision, no solar on ag remainders, pushing it on the county to force the fact that they can do that just to meet the renewable goals. Now, it does come back to private property rights, and if that's what a landowner wants to do, but you can't, the loss, I guess, becomes you have an ag remainder off of a, which is basically an off conveyance of a development. How can it continue to be an ag remainder if you're going to put solar panels on it? There are a lot of specifics that go into different things, but as a general Farm Bureau, we oppose solar going on class 1 and 2 soils.
To continue to follow up on that, because my understanding is that in some cases, the solar panels can be pivoted so that things could grow underneath them. They're pollinator friendly plants that can be done, and that the soil actually is being used for agricultural purposes. Does the Farm Bureau have a position about that?
Yeah, so what you're speaking of is agrivoltaics. And the Farm Bureau does have a position that we encourage the study of agrivoltaics and the possibilities for it to be utilized. But as of now, there is not very much true data that tells us that is a viable option for the good use of the land. There are those instances where you can do those things, but they're very limited. And also that usually in the instances that I've seen, it creates more, you need more land to do the same thing when you open up those pivoting solar panels and things like that.
Last question, Mr. Chairman, just to be clear, the Farm Bureau does not oppose having these on if it is the farmer or the landowner's option to do so using their private property rights to have solar panels on their property. You would not oppose that. Is that correct?
We don't oppose private property rights, or where we are for private property rights. So if that's truly what a person wants to do, but what the opposition that we have written is we look for the purpose or the repurposing of solar into an existing structures or non-agricultural uses.
Keeping the economic viability of farms, and sometimes that's a source of revenue that could keep the larger part of the farm active as well. Isn't that so?
Yeah, and I touched on that with ours. We have at our farm, we have solar panels on an existing building, and there are a lot of opportunities for that. But I think that what we've seen, Farm Bureau and farmers in general, is what we've seen is the push because of the ease of the opportunity just to put it on open ground. It's put on open ground instead of put on buildings or built into these existing structures or brownfields, which are on top of landfills and things like that aren't farmed.
Delegate Ziegler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me with my mask on? I'm getting up. Thank you. So I just wanted to address the SSTAT issue, and I will endeavor to turn it into a question somehow. But I am bringing a bill to address that, and I want to thank the many people in this room who have been suffering with me on a work group to try and do something about that. That really, as you say, they literally look at Google Maps, and I too have constituents who've had some drastically increased assessments for essentially not doing anything different. But I do think that we have a piece of legislation that will be helpful to farmers, that will encourage minimal value added on farm activities, and hopefully be very positive. Isn't that so?
Thank you. Really appreciate that.
Delegate Ziegler, you did that exactly right by turning it into a question. Are there any other questions from my colleagues? Okay, I guess my question is on that chicken cannon yard stat. Is that really the whole year or just the 81 home games?
It's the whole year.
Okay.
At least the numbers that I found about how many pounds people eat a year in chicken.
Okay, including a long postseason all the way into.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Any other questions from anybody? Okay, well, thank you all once again for joining us. Thank you to my colleagues. That is our only panel for this afternoon. So everybody enjoy a little bit of time off the rest of the afternoon, and we'll be back to work later this week. Thanks, everybody.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
Thank you. Good job.